Hey, so this is ChelseaMacPhail, and for my yearly submission, I'm going to show some video of two of the horses I had in training this past year. So this is Heath. He is a thoroughbred. He's a big guy. He's a little over 17 hands. And him and Colby, the quarter horse mare I'll show after him, came to me in end of January of 2020, and they were with me until early October. So it's fun to kind of show, that much training and transformation for both of them. So Heath, something to know about him is his owner was a little concerned that he was still affected by Lyme disease when he came to me. So he had had treatment, but she still felt he was not quite right. So when he started out in training, he was 3 days a week. He did test positive again for Lyme late spring. So we, cut his training back at that point as well. And then he also had an injury to his leg in the paddock. So his training was not quite as straightforward because we did have to take some time to rest and let him recuperate. But you'll see there's still a pretty dramatic transformation. The other thing to note about him is he has DSLD, which is just a degeneration of the suspensory ligaments. And his right hind is a bit more severe than the left, but you'll see kind of when he's moving, his fetlocks drop quite a bit. So my goal for him is really just to keep him stretching. Long term, we don't really want him taking more weight behind because we don't want to put more strain and stress on his hind legs. So keeping him in a stretch is pretty much the goal. And you can see here, he's a lovely mover. He's got a nice big walk, nice big trot. He loves to canter. It's easy for him. He would much prefer to canter than trot, so a lot of our work was really in the walk. And you can see here, he has some willingness to stretch, but he had quite a bit more development in the underneath of his neck than over his top line. So you see here, even just as he's walking, when he does stretch, he's not necessarily like really releasing the muscles in the bottom of his neck. So, over time, I was really looking for him to let go of that as he built his top line. And create a little bit more rhythm and engagement from front to back. He tends to have his decent motor of his own. He's very willing to go forward, but not necessarily always really pushing from the back to front. So Heath stayed with groundwork throughout his training. We focused primarily on just on building that strength without me on his back. So you see here, overall, what I'm really so pleased to see is just so much more relaxation. When he's stretching, you can see from that point where his neck meets his chest to where his neck meets his jaw, there's, the neck is slanted down towards the ground, and it's relaxed. So I love that we're working all the right muscles here. He's got a nice swing walk, but it's not quick. His tendency was definitely to get quick, but it's a nice, relaxed, rhythmic walk. And you can see he's pretty happy to stretch here. Initially, again, that wasn't his inclination. He was kind of developed to keep himself in a higher frame, although that higher frame really for him was not helpful to his body. He wasn't developed in a way that supported a higher frame. But he wanted to be there, you know, he wanted to travel with his head way up in the air and looking around. He isn't one to really come behind the vertical, which definitely makes things a little bit easier. I don't have to worry so much about, you know, when I'm asking him or taking any pressure with the reins, even when I'm doing the work in hand. I don't have to worry so much about him trying to curl behind. He didn't have that tendency. You'll see Colby later on that definitely was the case for her. So the biggest development I saw with him strength-wise, you know, we obviously reached a nice place of relaxation, but what you'll see here is that he's starting at moments to find this really lovely trot that is not so much rushing forward, but he's sending the energy up. So he's got this nice floaty rhythmic trot. And for him, it's moments, you know, it's not consistent. The walk is wonderful. I wouldn't change anything about his walk work. And we primarily did most of that, and again, for various reasons. You know, I wanted him to not build so much cardio. You know, he's one who's pretty happy to, as you can see here, break into a canter or break into a trot when things get difficult. So we spent a lot of time working the walk because it was so beneficial for him, especially, you know, knowing that he does have DSLD. You know, walk work is like his happy place. Like that's really where walking in the stretch, you know, doing that kind of work, that's so helpful to him. So we weren't really in any rush to get him, you know, trotting or cantering. And again, like he is one who, if we did, would just build up a lot of fitness, and he's even when he's not super fit, he's still happy to do it, to, you know, to break into a faster gait where he's not necessarily using himself there. But there, like in that moment where he just came by, that was a nice trot. He slowed down, it got more rhythmic, he's relaxed. So we're starting to see these pieces come together in the trot. And again, it's just, so like right there, really nice. It slows down a bit, and you can see it just develops this nice rhythm. He just looks cohesive. So for him, I'm, you know, continuing to do a lot of walk work, or I was continuing to do a lot of walk work with him, and then bringing him up into the trot occasionally to kind of see what we were working with. And that's really kind of my process when I'm working with a horse. And again, the trot got nice again there. Maybe a little bit touch fast, but I like that it just looks not so frantic, and not like his hind end and his front end are kind of doing two different things. Like right there, it's, you know, rushed, he's tense. You know, he's not kind of mindful of the circle. Looks like he's probably a little worried about a bug there as well. He's definitely a sensitive boy. Very, very sweet, very willing, but very definitely sensitive. So when, you know, these moments of seeing him relax consistently, especially in the walk, where, like, you know, he would just come out and he could walk around like that right from the start, nice and relaxed, like that to me is really a sense that we've hit our stride in this work. And then from then on, it's just testing, like, you know, how is he feeling in the trot? I tried maybe once a week. And here at this point, you know, he's a little distracted today, but mostly you can see the trot starting to come together. Definitely beneficial to continue, you know, doing some sessions in the trot work for him. And with the horse, with him, where we have like some concerns about the way he's using his body, we want to be extra careful that he's not putting excess strain, especially on his hind end, using that walk work where I know he's really relaxed right here, and you can see he comes back to it really easily. It's a sense that he's enjoying this. His ears look relaxed. His body, you can see the energy really flowing. He's pushing from behind, and you can see that energy coming out. His nose is kind of bobbing forward. It looks really nice. And again, that trot looks really nice there, where he starts off nice and slow. So you can see even the downward transition, he's staying relaxed. So we're seeing all these pieces come together with him at this point. And the canter for him, he again, he is forward thinking, so he'll occasionally give me a canter without asking. And it's not something that I worry too much about. And he would generally come back fairly quickly to a trot. But even in the canter, he was starting to show that when he would break into a canter, that he was able to stretch, but it was very hard for him. So in the very early days when he would canter and he was moving in a more hollow frame, he could stay cantering on a fairly small circle because he was using the muscles that he had developed. He had that strong muscle underneath his neck, so he could definitely do that. As he developed the ability to stretch in the walk and and somewhat in the trot, when he'd go to canter and I'd take some contact and ask him to stretch, he'd stretch and then almost immediately drop back into the trot, because that's really hard to do. And he was finding that moving in a way that's using his body in the correct way is challenging, especially when we're developing these muscles that he hasn't been using as consistently. So it's fun to see, with a horse who is forward thinking, what I've noticed is when they do start to use themselves well, they are slowing down a bit, because it's difficult to kind of hold that level of impulsion and relaxation, and engaging their core and using their top line. And that's a lot to ask all at once. So he's naturally finding a little bit slower, more relaxed gait, both in the walk and in the trot. He's naturally a nice mover. He had a nice walk when he came. He could very easily overtrack his front hoof prints with his back, with his hind feet. But he wasn't using his top line to do it. So it's nice to see all the pieces coming together. And overall, I love just the look of relaxation. So with Heath, I did consider using a shambone. I couldn't find it initially, and by the time I did find it, I found I did not need it. So while he wasn't, naturally wanting to stretch, which you'll see in the very early video of Colby, she was just, naturally wanting to stretch. Heath wasn't quite like that, but he found it and just found some comfort in it. So I found, by the time the shambone was discovered, it wasn't super helpful for him anymore. I did try side reins on him to see how he would do if I changed, the lunge line to just hook to the inside of his bit rather than running over his head. That didn't seem to really benefit him in any way, so we took it off, and you can see I didn't really use anything other than just the bridle, either with reins or the lunge line. And he's wearing the surcingle just because I can attach the tracer for the solo shot so that it's focusing on Heath and not on myself, which is a bit more beneficial. So this was definitely his easier direction going left. So both him and Colby tended to have an easier time going left. So I always start them going right so that we can, finish on their easier side and make sure that when we do finish, I can be sure we're not trying to get to a good place. I know that we can get to a good place. And again, I really like the look at this walk. He's so nice and relaxed. It's just a nice swinging rhythmic walk. And again, that underside of the neck is nice and relaxed. So, I know he's working the top line, but I also know that we're making some progress in letting some of those muscles that were a bit tense kind of relax, the ones that, he doesn't really need to be using. And so as I mentioned before, this was our goal for him, was really just to get him stretching. Obviously if he were to take a working walk, we know we're not really sending too much, weight behind. It's not like working pee-off or collection. But keeping him in a nice stretched walk. We know we're not gonna put any additional pressure on his hind end. So while you'll see Colby later work, a little bit of the beginnings of some pee-off for Heath, this was really the goal. This is just keep building his strength here. And again, there's really nothing I would change about this walk. I like the relaxation. I like the swing. Even that transition up to trot there was nice and relaxed. So it's nice to see, it's not the goal necessarily. I'm not expecting him to give me, a nice relaxed stretching transition, but he is starting to. You can see he comes into the trot, he's looking around, he's a little hollow, so I bring him in on a smaller circle here. And again, the goal is to put him just a little bit shoulder fore so that that inside hind engagement will help him relax and stretch back down again. You can see, the trot started out a little bit quick, but he's starting to find a nicer pace. He's swinging a little bit more. Right there, that's really nice. When he finds that deeper stretch, he gets a little slow, and so for him, it's nice to get to that point, because then I can begin to kind of think about kind of asking him, giving him the cue to work from back to front, by asking for that engagement, and then letting him stretch and then releasing the contact so he gets that reward. He's a horse who's naturally forward thinking, so when I do have those moments to send him on a little bit, for him, we're not thinking so much about, really riding him into advanced movements or anything, but the foundation is built for all of that on the ground. So with a forward thinking horse, I want to be able to put my legs on when we're riding. So when we think about the lunging work, when I do have the opportunity to send him forward, I can kind of create that foundation for him where he understands that concept of me asking him to move forward and into the contact. So he comes back to the stretch really well. Again, transitions I'm not overly worried about. Those will come together with time. Doing this work consistently. So what I like seeing is that he's coming back into the walk and looking to stretch pretty much right away. I don't have to really ask him for it. And this walk's really lovely, very relaxed, nice deep stretch, very swinging walk. Again, nothing that I want to change here. His walk is developed to a really nice place. And there's moments here, where he's walking, especially when that sun hits him as he's coming around, where you can really see the muscles of his top line have developed, and you can see them kind of popping out, especially right in front of the withers and along the top of his neck, where you can see the development physically. So yeah, as far as Heath's concerned, I was really happy with his progress. He built a lot of strength. He found a lot of relaxation. This walk's really beautiful. The trot was definitely getting stronger, and he was starting to show me those moments where he was developing this really lovely trot. Not so much rushing forward, but pushing up a little bit, having a little bit of hang time in the trot. And really that trot will just, he's no longer in training with me, but that trot would just get better even with just more walk work. And again, that was really primarily what we were doing, was just walking on the lunge line or walking in hand. So yeah, for most horses, the stretch is the foundation to something more. For Heath, the stretch keeps him a little bit on the forehand. So for his long-term, health and well-being, this is where we want him, and it's really nice to see him find this relaxation in his body, and his seemingly contentness in the arena. So this is Colby. She is a quarter horse mare, and she had, when she came, the goal was really to just, again, a lot of just strengthening, rebuilding some of her her muscle. It's a little hard to see, but if you look at the top of her croup, she has a slight little dip behind her sacroiliac joint and down towards her tail. So I was hoping that, by removing tack and getting her moving a little better, that those muscles would rebuild, and she'd strengthen, overall along her whole top line. Unlike Heath, she didn't have quite as much muscle built up underneath her neck, and day one she was happy to stretch. And you can see here, she's pretty comfortable stretching all the way down. She tends to be a little bit behind the leg, and so that was one thing I wanted to encourage her, that going forward she could stay relaxed and comfortable, that she could really use her head and neck and her body in a way that would benefit her. But you'll see in a lot of the upward transitions, she'll kind of pin her ears a little, or she'll swish her tail, and sometimes rather than going forward, she almost seems like she hesitates, like, I'm going to stop instead of go forward. So my goal with her was to get her a little bit happier, responding to aids, and really to encourage her to think more forward. So you can see in this clip again, this is only a couple weeks into having them in training. I think at this point Colby was still doing 3 days a week, and then for the remainder of the months she was pretty much consistently 5 days a week. But you can see here right off the bat, like she's just the kind of horse that's pretty happy to be allowed to stretch. There wasn't a whole lot of time taken to like encourage her to get into that position. She was pretty eager to offer it. So Heath's right hind had like kind of the bigger issue as far as the DSLD. With Colby, she also had a right hind previous injury. So one thing I did with her during our training was, with both of them, I kept them on really big circles. But what I noticed with her was that traveling right was actually a bit harder. And so when I would try to keep her on more of a 20-meter circle, there were times when she'd break into a cross canter, or she just seemed really unhappy. So we did take time during this process to just go back to straight in hand work. And anytime that I felt either the horses were showing me that there was some tension or that they were unhappy, we'd go back to the walk in hand, because what's so wonderful about it is if a horse is sound for turnout, they can work the walk in hand. We can stay all the way around the outside of the arena, and this is a really large arena, so that we're not taking any we're not having that extra pressure that comes from them being on working on a smaller circle. So we did that a few times. If I noticed that there was anything in her body that didn't look quite right, we would just take a step back. And you can see here, this was one of the things early on. She wasn't used to walking on the lunge line as much, so she did occasionally turn in, and you can see I just showed her, no, I'd like you to keep walking back on the circle. We keep everything really low key. I want her to enjoy sessions. And what I noticed in general is that she had a tendency not to be super happy about me making requests of her. There you can see I asked her to walk on. She swishes her tail. She's not super pleased about having to work. So in general, I always, I'm looking for her to show me kind of what she's ready for. And that's what's so wonderful about this system, is we can build so much foundation and relaxation in the walk work and stay there for quite a while and see some really great results. So you can see here, she's happy to trot, but it's not, it's kind of a flat trot. It's a little choppy. She doesn't appear to really be like swinging, and she's not really pushing from her hind legs. She is definitely more happy to use her forehand, and she is also built downhill. So one of the things that you'll see is that I do end up starting to teach her a little bit of pee-off and a little bit of sitting, because I wanted her to get used to using her motor in a different way. But again, like this trot work, she's happy enough to stretch a little bit. So she, pretty much from the very beginning, I was also occasionally working her on the lunge line, and because she was willing to offer a stretch, and it was beneficial at times. But even early on here, we were doing a lot of work in hand, just at the walk. And again, didn't ask for a canter here, but I just wait for her to come back to the trot. And she's obviously a bit tense. And then you see her relax and stretch a little bit. And again, like I'm encouraging her on not to just come back to a walk, but to stay in the trot a little bit, which is what I had wanted. And it's not uncommon for horses to break into the canter when you're asking them for more engagement in the trot, because a little canter where she's hollow is a lot easier than asking for more engagement in a trot when she's stretching. So you can see here, much more relaxed, much more swinging. Really, really happy with the change in her. So this lunging video is from August, and then I have a little bit of video of her under saddle in September. So with her, there's nothing I change about this walk. It's she's thinking forward. You know, her ears are perked forward. She's alert. She's got that nice little bob with her nose. You can see that that energy is kind of coming from behind and going all the way out. There's doesn't appear to be holding any tension. Her nose is out in front of the vertical. And that was one thing we did struggle a little bit with, is she looked like she had a little bit of like an overstretched ligament along her top line behind her pole. So she would tend to go behind the vertical, and I should have pointed out in the previous video, but you'll see it here too. In the walk, I was able to get her nose poking out and her to stay in front of the vertical. At the trot, it was still like something I was aware of and something I was constantly kind of trying to push her forward and keep her out on a bigger circle, because if she felt tension on from the lunge line, even though the tension isn't pulling backwards, she would still tend to go a little bit behind the vertical. That was one of the reasons why I felt like trying some of the ridden work would be helpful, because even though the reins are coming back to me and you would think like, you know, potentially she's going to curl back more and come behind the vertical, I felt like I could kind of steer her without having to like with the lunge line, it's going over her pole. So if I could steer her with more of like an opening rein and then take the pressure off, I might be able to get more from her in the trot with her not behind the vertical. You can see here a little bit like she comes behind the vertical when she's out at the edge of the lunge line and she feels that pressure. And one thing I did try with her was side reins really long, so that I could hook the lunge line to the inside of her bit rather than having it run overhead, but that did not help. So I did try a couple of different configurations with both her and Heath as far as using side reins or not using side reins. You can see again, she's a little bit behind the vertical there, so I tended to try to keep the circle again really big for her, because she was definitely more comfortable on a larger circle still. And I try to send her on so that, you know, keeping her thinking forward rather than, you know, if she's sucking back, she's definitely a lot more likely to be behind the vertical as well. So in the walk, I didn't see the behind the vertical as much. She was able to kind of open up the underneath of her neck and jaw. And so for her, that was, you know, a big part of her retraining, was trying to get her to stretch but think forward, like I mentioned before. So these are just kind of little things that, you know, had she been my horse in staying, like this is, you know, we would have kept probably lunging a little bit, you know, working the walk quite a bit, and then also you know, trying some ridden work as well and sticking with the pee-off, because that was really helpful for her. But you can see even with the little saddle pad there underneath the surcingle that she, you know, she still has, she has a short saddle support area, so she can't have a super long saddle, but you can see like she does look long, a little bit long in the back. And that can be deceiving with where a horse's, you know, ribs are ending and where they can support the saddle, and then where, how much longer their back goes before that sacroiliac joint. So, you know, for her, she had this like belly that was kind of hanging, and you know, her back definitely looked a bit weak, and You can see here, like, she looks a lot more relaxed, a lot stronger, but definitely we're still in the process of building. So for both her and Heath, going right was harder. So again, we started that direction, and then you can see here how she is going left. Again, I really like the walk. She's so relaxed. You can see her like shaking and swishing her tail. The bugs were not great this summer, so a little bothersome, but what I really like is that, in the upward transition, she's not, really tense and sucking back anymore. I don't see like the angry tail swishing that we were getting in the beginning. She just looks relaxed and happy to be at doing this work. You can see both her and Heath going this direction, especially lunging, are still bent a little bit to the outside. With Colby, when I had her in saddle, we started doing and in the work in hand, which is nice that you can do it there too, but I started asking her for some lateral flexion and starting to move her body in leg yielding. And so that's definitely something that she was, now that this stretch is so confirmed and she's built that top line and has that relaxation, the leg yielding benefited her quite a bit to kind of start thinking about moving her body around, my inside leg or, the whip when we're working in hand. But having that, that longitudinal, like that stretch and that longitudinal relaxation, now she's in a position where asking her to bend from her rib cage is much more accessible in a correct way. So what I love in her trot, and you could really feel it too riding her, is that she's got this moment of suspension in her trot, and she's pushing up rather than just out. For her, it definitely takes a little bit of forward encouragement, but she's pretty happy to offer that, and that's just a lovely feeling to sit on when they're not just, when the trot really lifts you out of the saddle. And it was something that I could kind of see when we were lunging, and at that point it's fun to get in the saddle and feel that you're being pushed up and out. The canter's looking really nice on her. She's stretching. She looks relaxed. In moments, definitely I would like to see her nose poking out a little bit more, but that was really beautiful. And again, we weren't doing a ton of canter, but that's obviously looking really nice and something to just kind of do a little bit more and a little bit more of as she gets even stronger. That's not a bad downward transition. So here you can see we're starting to do the ridden work. I like here her nose is still poked out, even in the stretch with contact with the reins. In this saddle, definitely not too long for her back, but a little bit tight in the shoulder. So not a perfect fit, but she seemed to be okay with it. We were in the process of kind of looking for different things to put on her. So what I like seeing there is, the walk doesn't look, different really from being lunging to being under saddle. You can see here, obviously the transition is tough for her. For me, I'm wondering about saddle fit. Like, is it bothering her a little bit? You can see I'm just following up with my hands, kind of maintaining just that contact to say, hey, I'd like you to stretch, and keeping her going forward. And you can see the transition up as well was a little like discombobulated, as far as her sense of like, oh, she's asked me to go forward, I'm ready to go forward. She was, sucking back, and I just kind of waited for her and kept encouraging her on, but not something that I'm trying to, I'm not trying to get after her for a quicker transition. Because she's a very thoughtful mare, very sweet, very thoughtful. And I could tell she's just figuring it out. And, also when I'm wondering about saddle fit too, like, is this something that doesn't feel right for her? You can see here, she's starting to stretch. She's coming in and out of it. And I'm just following her again, maintaining the contact. So as far as readiness, like, she definitely can be under saddle, definitely can be trotting. And I don't think she's going more behind the vertical being ridden than being lunged. So I definitely, it's, for me, I think that this ridden work can definitely be beneficial for her. That's really nice. And, there she's like right on the vertical. So again, like that was kind of my thought with starting to ride her. I thought, she's definitely strong. She's got this really nice looking trot. She's built up this ability to not just push herself forward, but push herself up in the trot. And she's really, kind of posting me out of the saddle. It's really, really lovely feeling. So all indication was that, she was really ready for this. And you can see her top line lighting up. You could definitely see she had a nice, her top line was getting a lot stronger. It was very noticeable. And her hindquarters gotten quite large and muscular. So I was really happy with how she looked. I was happy with her attitude in the ring, her relaxation. So we're going to change direction, obviously, change the directions, and, changes between the gaits tend to be when we lose the stretch, and that's certainly the case with her as well. So these are all pieces that I think will start to come together the more she does this. You can see at times my hands get really high up as I'm trying to maintain the contact with the reins. For being on the smaller side, she definitely used a lot of rein to stretch. So you can see at times where I'm trying to kind of maintain the contact, and then I shorten up and able to, maintain that contact with her mouth. And as soon as I do, she stretches again. I also found that she needed, especially this direction, a bit more outside rein support to turn. This is just something to note, the differences in her body and where she's a little stiffer or a little stronger and things are easier for her. those moments when, you know, I can kind of encourage her to bend a little bit around my inside leg and have, you know, consistent contact with the outside rein, you know, she stretches back down again. And again, there my reins got long, I shortened, and as soon as I did, she stretched. So, you know, it's really just maintaining that contact. You can see it, you know, there my reins were long. I almost had to, I was taking the rein over her withers, which, you know, is not what my goal is. So shortening up that rein allowed me to keep the contact straight from elbow to bit. And then she stretched, so. So it's worth noting that I'm not taking contact here with her reins, but I wanted to let her look at what was going on and just kind of take the pressure off, because she's a little worried. The neighbors started playing a lot of loud music, and then very thankfully, by the time I gotten off, we were done before they started like shooting fireworks off. So, you know, for her, she did a lot, but she tended to be a little afraid of that tree line. And so rather than kind of asking her just to put her head down again and stretch, I knew she wanted to take a look. So, you know, here again, it's really nice to see her nose poking out even with the contact, you know, and me in the saddle. You can see she gets a little worried as we come more towards the neighbor's house. She wants to look again, so you know, let her take a peek, and then we come back to a little more stretch work. So we came back to do a little bit more trot work. Again, you can see her tendency to go behind the vertical a bit when there's contact with the rein. She's a little slow here. She tended to be, like, upward transitions, again, tended to be a little bit of a struggle for her. So rather than, you know, really trying to push her on or get her going, I let her kind of ease into it, and I found that just, again, with her tendency to have this idea that, you know, sometimes being in the arena isn't much fun, I was a little bit careful with her just to keep her, you know, happy and wanting to, you know, cooperate. And so I kind of let that trot build rather than, again, trying to get like a really crisp upward transition. Eventually, sure, that would be the plan, but with her and how she's feeling right now, and again, my thoughts about saddle fit, you know, this isn't a perfect saddle for her, so I'm wondering, you know, about some of the feedback I'm getting. But there, you know, that's a nice trot. She's a little behind the vertical. I send her on a little bit there to see if I can get her to like poke her nose out a bit. You know, she looks really nice and relaxed when she's in that stretch. But you can see her trying to find it. You know, she is definitely a mare that she wants to please. So it's nice to see how much she's opened up. You know, her trot looks much more open. You know, you can see when she's really stretching, it slows down a bit. That's again when she kind of finds that rhythm and is kind of pushing up more than out. There you can see I gave her a big ask to get her going forward. Oh, this is looking really nice. She's definitely using all the right muscles. She's relaxed and forward, so I know just with time all of this will even out, and of course with better fitting saddle, that will definitely help as well. That was a much nicer downward transition. She stayed forward and relaxed. And she comes back into a nice stretch. So overall, really happy. I like seeing how her abdominals have really engaged, and she's, you know, her body looks so much different. She's, you know, holding her back up a bit. So here I just want to show you a little bit of our. So with the pee-off work, she's definitely understanding the concept of lifting diagonal pairs, but as you can see here, there's still a bit of tension. So there I'm asking, she's not doing much. No, then she takes 3 nice steps. She's thinking, my sense here was that she's thinking a little bit backwards and she's tense. So what I wanted to do was ask one more time, and again with her I'm just a little bit careful that we don't really drill anything, just because of her. I want her to, you know, find the work in the arena pleasant. So I gave her a treat. We come back around, and I ask her one more time. My goal for this pee-off, you know, was really to try and get her a little bit more relaxed now that she understands like the steps that she's taking with diagonal pairs. You can see her even here with our second attempt. She's still holding a little bit of tension in her neck. She's not stretching. You know, she comes over and immediately says, like, I know what you want me to do, something with the legs. She steps back, so I ask her to step forward, and then she took 2 diagonal steps, and I was like, okay, we're done. Again, I'd like to see more relaxation there. I'd like to see her thinking a bit more forward, but as far as the beginnings of pee-off, it's coming together.